Honey, let me tell y'all. Nothing prepares a mother for the day her own child looks at her like she's a burden he can't wait to shake off. And the wild part? That day wasn't some dark moment in a hospital or after some big family fallout. No, ma'am. It was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. The day I watched him walk down an aisle I helped pay for, wearing cufflinks that used to belong to his grandpa. I never imagined I'd walk out of that church feeling like someone had yanked the ground right out from under me. The morning started sweet enough. I was standing in the small prep room of the chapel, trying to fix the crooked boutonniere on my son Mason's suit jacket. He looked nervous, tapping his foot the way he used to before baseball games. "You all right, baby?" I asked, which made him chuckle because at 32 he hated when I called him that, but I still did anyway. I thought we were fine. I thought we were us. But then she walked in. The bride. Lila. She had this tight little smile that never reached her eyes. Not with me anyway. She whispered something into Mason's ear, and his whole posture changed. His shoulders stiffened. His jaw clenched. And suddenly I wasn't looking at my son. I was looking at a stranger wearing his face. He pulled me aside, not gently either, and the second door shut behind us. He hissed, "Mom, you need to go." I blinked like someone had slapped me. "Go where?" "Home," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Lila doesn't want you here. She thinks you'll make things tense." Tense? Me? I raised this boy. Held him when he was feverish. Worked 2 jobs so he could go to that fancy college he bragged about on his wedding website. And now, on his big day, I was apparently some kind of embarrassment. My voice shook. "Sweetheart, did I do something wrong? Did I say something?" He wouldn't look at me. "Please don't make this harder. Just go." Honey, when your own child asks you to leave his wedding, the words don't just hurt. They rearrange something inside you. Like a door that's been shut for years suddenly slams in your face. I walked out of that chapel trying to hide the tremble in my hands, trying to keep my head high even though I felt like a kicked dog. Folks stared. Whispered. Someone even reached for my arm, but I brushed past them. I didn't want pity. I wanted my son back, and it was clear I wasn't getting him today. When I stepped outside, the wind was sharp, like even the weather had something to say about this mess. I sat in my car for a long minute, staring at the steering wheel, wondering how in the world we'd gotten here. But sugar, what I said next. What came out of my mouth when Mason chased me into the parking lot asking for something he wasn't ready to lose. That was the moment everything changed. Because baby, the second he asked me for those ranch keys, he learned real quick that his mama wasn't someone you toss aside like yesterday's mail. Sweetheart, the morning of the rehearsal dinner, I woke up with that strange knot in my chest, the kind you get when the weather's about to turn, but the sky still pretends it's sunny. I ironed my dress, one of those soft teal numbers I'd saved for special occasions. I even pinned my hair the way my late husband used to, like a loose twist with a pearl comb. "You're gonna do great, darlin'," I whispered to my reflection, trying to shake off that uneasy feeling. But the moment I pulled up to the venue, this fancy barn-style lodge Megan's family rented, something felt off. Folks were milling around, laughing easy, sipping sweet tea out of mason jars, but when I walked in, conversations dipped for half a breath. Not long enough to call rude, but long enough to feel it prickle the back of my neck. Megan's mother, Patricia, spotted me first. Lord, that woman had the kind of smile that looked glued on, too wide, too tight, like it came with instructions. "Oh, Marilyn," she said, blinking like I'd shown up uninvited. "You made it." "Well, I am the groom's mother," I said with a small laugh, but she didn't laugh back. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was overwhelmed. Weddings do put folks in a tizzy. But then little things started stacking up like mismatched Tupperware lids. They'd assigned seats for the rehearsal dinner. Everybody had a place card. Everybody except me. My card wasn't missing. It had never been printed. "Oh gosh, so sorry, must be a mix-up," Megan chirped when I asked quietly. "Just sit anywhere. Maybe near the back so we can keep parents and bridal party up front for photos tonight." Parents. Plural. But somehow I wasn't included in that category anymore. Still I smiled. Still I sat in the back. Still I told myself it's his wedding week. Don't make waves. But honey, waves were coming whether I made them or not. Halfway through dinner, I watched Megan lean in close to my son, whispering something sharp behind that pretty smile of hers. He glanced back at me. Not the warm look he used to give. The boy who once hugged me so tight on Valentine's Day because he didn't have a card for me. No. This look was skittish guilty. Then came the moment that still feels like a splinter under my skin. They were practicing the processional, lining folks up in order. Bridesmaids, groomsmen, parents. I stood waiting for someone to point me to my spot. My son didn't even turn around. It was the wedding coordinator, a young girl barely out of college, who finally approached me with that polite hush voice. Mrs. Carter? I think you'll just walk in after everyone. The bride wants a simpler aisle moment. Simpler. As in without me. I swallowed hard, nodded like it didn't sting and stepped aside. But inside something old and heavy shifted. The same place that carried every birthday I organized, every scraped knee I kissed, every night I stayed up waiting for him to come home safe. I reminded myself, just get through the wedding. Just get through tomorrow. But sweetheart, tomorrow had other plans. Because that night, when I stepped outside for air, I overheard something behind the barn doors, and what I heard Megan say about me. Lord, it changed the whole direction of this story. Honey, when I walked into that rehearsal hall the next afternoon, the air felt stiff, like everyone had rehearsed a smile they didn't really mean. Folks nodded at me, sure, but it was that tight-lipped kind of nod, polite enough to look decent, cold enough to sting. I straightened my shawl and kept walking, telling myself I was reading too much into the silence, though in my gut I knew something was off as a $3 bill. The bridesmaids were huddled in a corner, whispering like middle school girls instead of grown women wearing satin gowns. Every time I got within 10 feet, they cut their eyes away real quick. The kind of quick that tells you everything you're not supposed to know. And there was my son, Ethan, pacing with a clipboard in his hand like he was managing the Macy's parade. He used to run across yards barefoot to hug me. Now he looked like he needed an appointment just to say hello. When he finally spotted me, he walked over stiff as a mailbox. Mom, can you just stay toward the back? Don't get the bride stressed, he muttered, rubbing his forehead like I'd already done something wrong. I blinked at him, stunned. I'd raised that boy with manners sharper than a preacher's suit. Before I could say a word, his fiancée Lacey strutted over, all glitter, perfume, and attitude packed into one tight little dress. She didn't greet me, didn't smile, just stared me down like she was evaluating livestock. Then she asked, Ethan, why is she standing up here? Didn't we talk about boundaries? Boundaries? Lord have mercy, the way she said it, like I was a stray dog that wandered in from the highway. My cheeks burned. My tongue went numb. I felt like I'd been shoved out of my own skin. But I swallowed hard and stepped aside because that's what mothers do sometimes. We choose peace even when we're standing in the middle of someone else's storm. When the rehearsal wrapped up, folks scattered like they couldn't wait to be anywhere but near me. I walked outside, letting the warm air settle my nerves, and that's when I heard it. Lacey inside the hall, talking loud enough to slice me clean open. I swear, Ethan, if your mom ruins one photo, I'm done. This is my day, not hers. Her voice carried through the doorway like poison carried on a breeze. Ethan sighed, the way men sigh when they're too weak to stand up for the woman who raised them. I'll handle it, he said. That's when something inside me didn't break, it shifted. Like a door inside my heart that had been cracked open for years finally swung shut. I wasn't angry, not yet. Anger burns hot. This was colder, cleaner, a quiet kind of knowing that told me, baby, you're about to be tested in ways you ain't been tested before. I walked to my old Chevy, sat behind the wheel and stared at my hands. Hands that packed his lunches, patched his scrapes, held him through nightmares, clapped for every little victory of his life. And now? Those same hands weren't welcome near the altar he was building with a woman who despised me. But sweetheart, if you think that was the worst of it, you better buckle in. Because what Lacey did next, and how Ethan let it happen, was the moment this whole story spun clean off its axis. And sugar, trust me, the next scene? That's where the first real crack forms. The one that leads all the way to him throwing me out of his own wedding. Honey, you ever walk into a room and immediately feel like the temperature dropped 10 degrees? Like folks ain't saying nothing. but their silence is loud enough to rattle your teeth? That's exactly how it felt when I stepped into the rehearsal hall that night. Now mind you, I showed up with a smile on, carrying a little gift bag for my future daughter-in-law, just a simple embroidered handkerchief I stitched myself. Something old, something meaningful. Something a mother gives with her whole heart. But the second I walked through those glass doors, the energy snapped tight like a clothesline in a storm. Bridesmaids froze. Groomsmen looked at the floor. And my soon-to-be daughter-in-law? Lord. That girl stood there with her hands on her hips like she'd been practicing that pose all afternoon. I didn't know what I'd walked into, but I could feel eyes crawling up and down me like I'd shown up wearing a Halloween costume instead of a nice blouse and slacks. My son, bless him, hurried over like he was trying to put out a fire. "Mom," he whispered, tugging me aside. "Maybe don't stay long. She's stressed." Stressed? Honey, I've seen stressed. I raised 3 boys without air conditioning in July. This wasn't stress. This was someone doesn't want me here wearing a veil and fake lashes. But I bit my tongue. I've always bitten my tongue. That's the curse of mothers. We swallow our feelings so our kids don't have to taste bitterness. I placed that little gift bag on the table near her purse. She glanced at it like it was a bill she didn't feel like paying. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Just a small something for tomorrow." She didn't even touch it. Didn't even lean toward it. Instead, she smiled that tight little smile folks give you when they want you to leave, but don't want to say it out loud in front of witnesses. But I saw something else too, Sugar. A flicker in her eyes. Not annoyance, fear. Like my simple presence somehow threatened the picture she wanted to paint for tomorrow. And that's when it hit me. This girl doesn't dislike me. She fears losing control. Because women like her, they don't want family. They want an audience. When dinner started, they sat everyone at long tables decorated with candles and fancy folded napkins. They placed me at the very end, not next to my son, not near anyone I knew. Just tucked down by the exit like they were planning my escape route. And still I tried to be gracious. But halfway through the meal, I accidentally overheard the bride whispering to her maid of honor. "I swear, if his mom tries to insert herself tomorrow, I'm gonna lose it." Insert myself? Baby, I was the one who raised the man she was marrying. Insert myself? I was the root they grew the whole tree from. I sat there stirring my sweet tea, feeling something inside me shift, slow but certain, like a hinge finally loosening. And Sugar, that shift? It was the beginning of the moment that wedding truly turned upside down. Because what happened the next morning at that church doorway is the part folks still whisper about. And trust me, it only gets wilder from here. Sugar, if there's one thing life has taught me, it's that the loudest rooms often quiet down when the truth walks in. And that afternoon, the truth walked in wearing a lace veil and a smile sharp enough to slice marble. After the rehearsal flare-up, folks scattered like spooked chickens, whispering under their breath, trying to stitch together the pieces of what they thought they saw. And me? I headed back to my guest cabin on the property. Boots dusty, heart heavy, hands still trembling from holding back words that wanted to leap out of my mouth. I had barely kicked off my shoes when I heard a knock. Fast, nervous, like whoever was behind it didn't want to be caught talking to me. I opened the door and found my nephew's wife, Emily, clutching her tote bag like a life preserver. "Aunt Linda. You got a minute?" she whispered. "Honey, I've got a whole hour if you need it," I said, stepping aside. She slipped inside, shut the door behind her, and exhaled like she'd been underwater too long. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she started, eyes darting around as if cameras were hidden in the rafters. "But something's wrong with this wedding. And I mean real wrong. Now Sugar, I don't spook easy. But the way she said it, low, urgent, almost scared, made my stomach tighten like a fist. "What did you see?" I asked. She hesitated, chewing her lip. Then she pulled out her phone. "I wasn't trying to snoop. I swear. But the bridesmaids were talking and I overheard something about, well, why Michael didn't want you near the ceremony." My chest tightened. "Go on." She tapped her screen, zooming in on a screenshot. It was a text thread between my son's bride and her mother. And baby, the words hit me like cold metal. "Make sure Linda stays far from our table. She's not part of the image we want. Michael will fall in line. He always does." My breath left my body so fast I had to sit down. Not part of the image. My own son. My ranch, my land, my hands that raised him, fed him, clothed him, reduced to a prop arrangement in someone else's picture? But that wasn't the worst of it. Emily swallowed. There's more. She showed me the next messages. Once we sign the transfer papers after the honeymoon, then he can deal with her. She won't fight it. She's too soft. Soft? Baby, my heart might be tender, but it ain't made of pudding. I sat there shaking so hard my teeth almost clicked. Not from sadness, no, that ship had sailed. This was something colder. Something ancient. Something women feel deep in their bones when they realize someone's been plotting behind their back. They weren't just trying to keep me out of a wedding. They were planning to take the ranch I built from dirt and sweat and heartbreak. The ranch my husband and I poured 30 years into. The ranch Michael grew up on, running through fields, learning how to saddle a horse before he even learned long division. Emily placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. I didn't know who else to tell. You deserve to know what's being said. I nodded slowly, staring at the floorboards as the truth settled in like a storm cloud. Honey, I murmured, voice steady as creek stone. You did the right thing. And now I know exactly what game is being played. Because let me tell you something. When people mistake your kindness for weakness, the day you finally stand up will feel like an earthquake. And sugar. I was about to shake that whole wedding to its knees. But you ain't heard nothing yet, because the next morning someone else came knocking. And what they told me flipped everything upside down all over again. Baby, when I walked out of that reception hall, my boots crunching on the gravel, my whole chest felt like somebody had cinched a belt around it and pulled tight. I wasn't crying. Not yet. I was just stunned. You ever get hit with a truth so hard it don't knock you down, it just hollows you out? That was me. The air was warm, but I swear I felt cold right down to my bones. Folks inside were still cheering. Music thumping through the walls like my heartbeat mocking me. My own son had thrown me out of his wedding to keep his bride comfortable. Lord, the irony. I raised that boy on comfort. I gave him comfort before he even knew what comfort was. I walked toward my truck, old, dented, loyal, one of the last things his daddy ever fixed before he passed. I gripped the door handle and leaned against it, letting the night steady me. My hands were shaking, but not from anger, not yet. It was the kind of tremble that comes from disappointment so deep it hits marrow. I was about to climb inside when I heard footsteps behind me, quick, hesitant ones. Mrs. Lawson, a voice whispered. It was Emma's aunt, the only person from her side who treated me like a human being all day. Her face was red, like she'd been holding back tears or biting her tongue so long it hurt. I saw what happened, she murmured. You didn't deserve that. Not one bit. I forced a smile. Honey, it's their day. I don't want to cause a stir. She shook her head so hard her earrings danced. A stir? Sweetheart, they threw out the woman who raised the groom. People noticed. For the first time since the chaos, I felt a flicker of something. Maybe dignity, maybe clarity, maybe both. Still, I wasn't ready to walk back in. I wasn't gonna beg for space in a room I helped pay for. Her aunt hesitated, then leaned in. Can I tell you something and you didn't hear it from me? Go ahead, I said softly. Emma. She told the planner before the ceremony that she didn't want you in the pictures. Said you didn't fit the aesthetic. Baby, that one went straight through me. Not angry, just sharp. Like the truth finally found the right angle to cut. I nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest. She pressed my hand. You deserve better than this circus. Before I could respond, the doors behind us burst open and out stumbled my son's best man, half drunk, half panicked. There you are, he said, breathless. Cole's looking for you. He's freaking out. I think he finally realized he messed up. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just looked at the kid and said, well, he should have realized it before he raised his voice at me. And honey, that's when something inside me snapped into place. Not broken, aligned. Like my spirit finally stood up straight after bending too long. I climbed into my truck, turned the ignition, and the engine grumbled awake like it had something to say about all this too. The best man rushed forward. Wait. He wants to talk. I looked at him through the open window. He had his chance. Then I drove off slow, steady, leaving behind the music, the lights, the people who thought I'd just roll over like always. But sugar. As I pulled onto the highway, the moon bright above me, I had no idea the very next morning that same boy, my son, would show up on my porch asking for something he thought he still had a right to. And Lord, he was not prepared for the 4 words I gave him, because what happened when he demanded those ranch keys? Phew, buckle up, honey. That's where this story truly cracks wide open. Honey, when I tell you the air shifted inside that wedding hall, I mean it shifted like a storm rolling in from nowhere. One moment the room was full of soft chatter and camera flashes, and the next, after my son's harsh words sent me walking out, everything felt different. I didn't cry, not yet, but my hands shook the whole ride home. My old truck rattled down that gravel road like it knew I was barely holding myself together. When I reached the ranch, the porch light flicked on by itself, motion sensor. Funny how even a light can feel more welcoming than your own child. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of what had just happened. You raise a boy, teach him right from wrong, patch up his scraped knees, sit in ER waiting rooms, clap at school plays and hot gyms, and somehow he grows into a man who throws you out like yesterday's leftovers. But sweetheart, here's the thing, moments like that, they don't just hurt, they rearrange you. I walked into the kitchen, made myself some sweet tea, and set the glass on the table without drinking it. My heart was doing that strange tremble again. The one you get when you know life just turned a corner you didn't see coming. And as I looked around my quiet house, something sank in deep. I wasn't the one who broke anything today. I was the one who got broken on. That night I didn't sleep. Not even a wink. I sat in my rocking chair with an old quilt over my lap, thinking back through years of memories with my boy. His little cowboy boots clacking on the wood floors, the way he'd fall asleep on my chest after long days in the pasture, the way he'd tug my sleeve when he wanted another bedtime story. Somewhere along the way, someone taught him that his mama's place was conditional. And I knew exactly who. But the real twist, sugar? Morning brought a whole new mess. Just as dawn painted the sky that easy peach color, I heard tires crunching up my driveway. First, I figured it might be the mailman running early. But nope, it was their car. Michael stepped out wearing the same suit from the wedding, jacket wrinkled, hair a wreck. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. And trailing behind him, moving slow, hesitant as a deer sniffing danger, was his new bride. The same bride who whispered something into his ear minutes before he told me to leave the wedding and stop causing drama. Now she was standing at the foot of my porch like a child caught stealing cookies. He didn't say hello. Didn't apologize. Didn't even ask if I'd made it home safe. No, ma'am. The very first thing out of his mouth was, "Mom, we need the ranch keys." Just like that. No shame. No softness. No acknowledgement of the knife he'd twisted just hours earlier. I leaned my weight on the railing, steadying myself, staring at him long enough to make him shift on his feet. The sun caught his face, and that's when I saw it, fear. Real fear. Something had gone wrong, something big. But sweetness. It was what he said next that nearly knocked the wind out of me. Because when he explained why he needed those keys, oh honey, even you won't believe the mess that boy dragged himself into next. I don't know if you've ever tried walking down a gravel driveway in heels, but honey, I was doing it like a woman who had finally remembered she had a spine. My son was still trailing behind me, shouting my name like I was a loose cow he needed to rope back into the barn. I didn't stop. Didn't even blink. The air felt different on my skin, lighter, like the weight he'd put on me all morning had finally slipped clean off. "Mom! Wait!" he yelled again. "You can't just leave." I almost laughed. Can't leave? Baby, I'd been left long before I stood up from that reception table. I reached my truck, opened the door, and that old familiar leather smell washed over me like comfort you can touch. I grabbed the steering wheel, but I didn't climb in. Not yet. Something inside me, maybe the part still remembering the boy he once was, forced me to turn back around and give him one more chance to show even a flicker of respect. He jogged up to me, breathless, face red, hair all messy from running. "Mom," he panted. You need to give us the ranch keys." There it was. Not "Are you okay?" Not "I'm sorry." Not "I didn't mean what I said back there." Just that one word he'd always been comfortable tossing at me, give. I leaned against the truck door, crossed my arms and let him talk. Lord, the boy truly believed he had authority in that moment. He started rambling about how the wedding party needed a place to take pictures later, how the ranch looked aesthetic, how his bride wanted some special sunset shot in front of the old oak tree. He talked fast, like if he filled the air with enough noise, he might drown out what he did earlier. Then he said the part that near about sucked the breath out of me. Mom, don't make this difficult. My wife doesn't want you causing more issues today. Issues? Me? The mother he embarrassed in front of 200 people? Oh, sweetheart. I felt a click inside me. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet, clean break between the woman who used to take every insult like a swallowed stone, and the woman finally realizing she didn't have to anymore. You're asking for the ranch keys, I repeated gently. After what happened back there? He groaned like I was being unreasonable. Mom, please. Can we not drag this out? Just give me the keys. The property is part of my future anyway, so. That's when I uncrossed my arms. Very slowly. Very steadily. I stepped right up to him until he had no choice but to meet my eyes. The boy looked nervous, like a child caught in the pantry with chocolate all over his face. Son, I said softly, I walked out because you told me to, but asking for my keys right after? That hits different. He opened his mouth, but I lifted a hand. And before you say another word, I added, you better think real hard about whether you're talking to your mother or a convenience. He blinked. Confused. Off balance. Like it had never crossed his mind that I could be anything other than the woman who bent herself in half every time he snapped his fingers. Mom, he said finally, can you please just... No, I cut in. Calm. Steady. Not this time. His jaw dropped like he'd never heard the word before. And honey. That's when everything shifted. Because what I told him next, those 4 words, phew. They didn't just silence him, they froze the whole wedding behind him. And sugar, you're about to hear them, but not yet. Let's walk into that moment together. Honey, the second I walked back through my front door after that long, bone-deep, exhausting night, I could feel something in my house was off, like the air itself had been holding its breath while I was gone. My old dog, Rusty, came trotting up to me, whining like he'd sensed everything that had gone down at the wedding. I knelt down, scratching behind his ears, whispering, It's all right, old boy. Mama's home. Even though my heart felt like someone had wrung it out like a dish rag. I was still wearing the same shoes I'd been shoved out of the wedding in. Dust on the heels, my hair fallen flat. Mascara smudged like I'd been through a storm I never saw coming. I poured myself a glass of iced tea, sweet enough to sting, sat at the dining table, and let the whole night replay in my mind. Him yelling. Her smirking. The way the crowd parted like I carried the plague. And those 4 words I'd given him when he chased me into the parking lot, Lord. They echoed in my ears like a church bell in an empty valley. I should have been crying. I should have been shaking. But sugar, instead, I felt this slow-building steadiness rising up in me. The kind women get after they've finally stopped apologizing for things they didn't break. I set the glass down and noticed something odd. The porch light was still on. I always switch it off before leaving. Always. My stomach sank as I walked toward the front window. Rusty started growling low. That old man rumble he only uses when someone unwelcome is near. And sure enough, headlights rolled into my driveway. My son's truck. I felt every muscle in my shoulders locked tight. I wasn't ready. Not for another shouting match. Not for more excuses wrapped in tears. Not for him trying to twist the truth into something easier for him to swallow. But the door didn't slam this time. He stepped out slow, shoulders hunched, suit jacket wrinkled. Hair a mess like he'd been pacing or pulling at it for hours. And for the first time since he said those hateful words to me at his wedding, he looked young. Lost. Like the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and say, Mama, fix it. He came to the porch, hesitated, then knocked, soft, uncertain. I didn't open it right away. Let him feel that pause. Let him understand that access to me was no longer guaranteed. When I finally cracked the door, he looked up with eyes red as sunset. Mom, he whispered, voice shaking. Can I talk to you? Rusty pushed his head out like he was auditioning to be my bodyguard. I kept my hand on the edge of the door, steady, calm. Talking seemed real easy for you earlier, I said quietly. You didn't stutter one bit when you told me to leave. He swallowed hard, tears gathering fast. It wasn't supposed to go like that. He stopped, shook his head. I messed up. Bad. A tiny part of me wanted to pull him into my arms, the way only a mother can forgive without thinking. But the bigger part, the one that had been bruised, dismissed, humiliated, held me firmly where I stood. "What do you want, baby?" I asked softly. He glanced toward his truck like he needed backup from the shadows. "I came for the ranch keys," he said finally. We were supposed to spend the morning there. She wanted pictures. Said it'd make good memories." My breath caught, not from surprise but from the pure gall of it. He wanted the ranch keys. After everything. After throwing me out of the one day I should have been honored at. And that's when it happened again, that calm, almost dangerous clarity sliding over me like cool water. Because if he thought I was just going to hand over the last piece of my life that still held meaning, oh honey, he wasn't ready for what I was about to say next. And sugar, neither was I. Because the truth that came out of my mouth wasn't rehearsed, it was born. And it changed everything. Honey, I wish I could tell you that after that rehearsal dinner mess, the next morning brought clarity. But no, ma'am, it brought something else entirely. I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, the kind you feel when you know the day is gonna test every inch of patience the Lord ever gave you. The sun was barely up, yet the ranch felt louder than a state fair. Trucks pulling in, florists shouting, decorations swinging in the wind, and folks hustling around like the world was ending at noon. I stood by my front porch with my cup of coffee, watching all those people prepare for a wedding I wasn't sure I still belonged at. Funny thing, not one of them looked my way. Not even the wedding planner. That woman strutted around like she owned the soil under her heels. And maybe she did for that day anyway. As I sipped my coffee, Avery drove up, my son, still wearing that same tight jaw he had last night. He stepped out of his truck, slammed the door harder than necessary, and walked toward me like a man headed to a confession he didn't want to make. The morning breeze carried a bit of hay scent and dust, swirling around us like the land itself was listening. "Morning, Mom," he muttered. "Morning," I said back, calm as still water, even though my heart was knotted like fishing line. He looked everywhere except at me. The horses, the barn, the distant hills. Anywhere he could hide from the truth sitting between us. Then he finally said it. "Look, about last night. Mia's just stressed, okay? She didn't mean anything by it. Weddings make people, I dunno, act weird. Darlin', let me tell you something. When a grown man starts fumbling with excuses, he's not trying to explain. He's trying to protect whatever lie he agreed to." I didn't argue. I just asked, "Is that what you think? That she didn't mean it?" He swallowed hard. That boy couldn't lie to save his boots. "I think she just wants the day to go a certain way. Without me." I asked gently. His silence was louder than any shout. Before he could answer, here came Mia, floating toward us in a white robe, hair pinned up like a queen heading to her coronation. Her eyes flicked at me, then she looped her arm through Avery's like she was claiming property. "Sweetheart, we need your help inside," she said to him, ignoring me just fine. But then, like she couldn't help exposing herself, she added, "And make sure your mom doesn't wander into the dressing area. We don't need any extra complications." Complications? That word cut sharper than barbed wire. Avery flinched but said nothing. The boy might as well have been stitched into her shadow. She tugged him away, but before disappearing inside, she looked back at me and smiled, small, tight, the kind of smile a person gives when they believe they've already won. But oh honey, little did she know the storm hadn't even started yet. Something shifted in me right there on that porch. A woman can stay quiet for only so long before her silence becomes a sharpened blade. And trust me, darlin', what I did next, it was the beginning of the moment that'll echo through that wedding forever. Because when a bride tries to erase a mother, well, sugar, that's when the story flips in a way nobody's ready for. Especially not her. Honey. The moment I stepped into that reception hall again, it felt like walking into a storm that hadn't decided whether to strike or simmer. The music was low, the chatter uneasy, and folks stared at me the way people do when they sense something big's about to break loose. And they weren't wrong. A few cousins gasped softly when they saw me. One of my nieces whispered, "Lord," she came back. Like I was a ghost they weren't ready for. But sugar, I wasn't the ghost. I was the reckoning. The ranch keys were still warm in my hand. And I wasn't holding them like some scared mama coming to apologize. No, ma'am. I held them the way a woman does when she finally remembers what belongs to her, and what don't. Across the room my son spotted me. His face drained of color so fast you'd think someone unplugged him. He whispered something to his bride, and she looked over too, her smile dropping like a bad poker hand. I didn't rush. Didn't flinch. Didn't shrink. I walked toward them slow, steady, like every step was its own sentence. The air felt thick enough to slice. Tables went quiet one by one. Even the DJ muted the music like he sensed Judgment Day strolling in on cowboy boots. "Mom, why are you here?" my son said, his voice all breath, no backbone. Not anger this time. Fear. And honey, I didn't enjoy that fear. But I sure as the sunrise understood it. Because children who forget the hand that raised them tend to panic when they realize that same hand can also let go. I held up the keys. Just a small jingle, but Lord, it echoed through the room like a church bell. "You came earlier," he stammered. "But that wasn't the time or place to make a scene. This is different. Sugar." I almost laughed out loud. Because ain't it funny how folks call it a scene only when the truth ain't convenient for 'em? I leaned in just enough for only him, his bride, and the nearest 3 gossiping aunties to hear me. "You asked for these keys," I said softly. "So I came to give 'em, after you told your own mother to leave your weddin' like she was trackin' mud on the carpet." He swallowed hard. His bride's jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. And that's when she spoke. The woman who'd been pulling the strings behind every disrespect. "We didn't mean anything personal," she said. "We just wanted our wedding a certain way. No drama, no old-fashioned interruptions." Honey, that old-fashioned hit my ears like a slap. I straightened up slow. The kind of slow that says I'm done entertainin' foolishness. "You wanted a weddin' without old-fashioned interruptions?" I said. "Sweetheart. Then you shouldn't have married into a family built by an old-fashioned woman." People murmured. Chairs creaked. Someone whispered, "Oh Lord, here it comes." But sugar, I wasn't there to yell or fight. No. That's messy. And messy ain't powerful. Quiet is powerful. Truth is powerful. And I had both. I placed the ranch keys gently, ever so gently, into my son's hand. His fingers curled around them like they burned. Then I said the 4 words that froze that entire room solid. "The ranch is sold." Gasps. Hands over mouths. The bride staggered like she missed a step. My son whispered, "Mom. What do you mean sold?" But I didn't answer. Not yet. Because the silence that followed, honey, that silence was the bridge to everything I was about to reveal next. And trust me, sweetheart, you're not ready for what happened after those 4 words landed. Because when the truth finally came out about who really pushed me out, and what they planned to take from me, that wedding didn't just fall apart. It exploded. Sugar, that evening felt different the moment the sun dipped behind the barn and left the yard soaked in that orange-pink glow James used to call God's paintbrush. I had just finished sweeping the porch, trying to clear my head the way women my age do, clean until our thoughts stop rattling, when I noticed the sky had gone quiet. No wind, no crickets, not even the old windmill squeaking. Just stillness. The kind that comes right before truth finally breaks through. I was carrying a stack of wedding favors I'd packed up earlier, ones I wasn't allowed to hand out because, according to my son's bride, they didn't fit her aesthetic. But something in me stalled halfway up the porch. Those little bags suddenly felt heavier than gravel, not because of what was inside, but because of what they represented. All the years of sewing, planning, giving, showing up, and somehow still being told I was the extra piece of furniture folks trip over but never move. I set the favors down, rubbed my shoulder, and pulled out my phone just to check the weather. But instead of a forecast, I saw a text from one of the ranch hands, Clay. "Miss Marlene, you might want to come down to the stables. Something's going on." My stomach tightened. Clay wasn't the dramatic type. If he was texting, it wasn't about a loose chicken or a broken latch. I grabbed my keys and hurried across the yard, dust kicking up under my shoes. When I turned the corner, I stopped cold. There, leaning against the stable fence like he owned the whole damn world, was my son, Evan. Still in his rumpled dress shirt from the wedding, tie hanging loose, eyes puffy like he'd been crying or drinking or both. And beside him, pacing like a caged fox, was his wife. Lord, even from a distance I could hear her voice, sharp, fast, slicing through the silence like broken glass. My heart started pounding, but not from fear. From knowing. Knowing this moment was building ever since that wedding hall where they told me to leave. knowing this wasn't going to be a conversation, it was going to be a reckoning. "Mom," Evan called out, trying to sound steady but wobbling like a newborn calf. "We need the ranch keys. Now." His wife crossed her arms, chin lifted high like she'd rehearsed the stance in a mirror. "Yes," she snapped. "We're moving in tonight. You can gather your things tomorrow." Just like that. Like I was some ranch hand finishing a shift. Like this land wasn't the very place where I raised him, buried his father, and poured every ounce of love a woman could pour into a life. I stared at them, feeling that familiar shake in my hands, the kind that comes right before a storm. All those years of being quiet, being polite, stepping aside, letting their wants swallow my needs. It all rose up like fire in my chest. And baby, right then something shifted in my spine. Something strong. Something done. I walked closer, slow, steady, letting the dry grass crunch beneath my feet like punctuation marks. They wanted the ranch keys. They wanted the home they'd cast me out of. They wanted to erase me while living in the house I kept standing. Well, they were about to learn something. A lesson no mama ever wants to teach but sometimes has to. And the 4 words I finally gave them? Oh, sugar. Those 4 words changed everything. Because what I told them next didn't just stop them in their tracks. It dropped the whole damn night into silence. And the real story began right there. Sugar, when I walked back into that ranch house after the wedding fiasco, something in the air felt different, heavier, like the walls were bracing themselves for the storm they knew was heading straight for me. Maybe it was the way Cooper's old boots still sat by the door, or maybe it was the quiet, the kind that presses on your chest like humidity before a summer tornado, but I knew deep down my boy wasn't done with me yet. And sure enough, just as I set my purse on the counter, my phone buzzed again. This time not frantic, not apologetic, but one of those short, clipped messages men send when they're trying real hard to act tougher than they feel. "Mom, call me. Now." Now, sugar, I wasn't born yesterday. A message like that ain't a request. That's a demand. And I don't answer demands, especially not after being tossed out of my own son's wedding like a ketchup packet nobody ordered. But something told me this wasn't just about pride anymore. Something deeper was unraveling under his voice. So I called. He picked up on the first ring, breathless, talking fast, too fast. "Mom, look, we need the ranch keys. It's serious. Just please drive them over." No explanation, no softness, no acknowledgement of the humiliation I just walked through. My instinct said to tell him to go to hell wrapped in a bow, but something colder whispered, "Listen first." Because when kids grow quiet in the wrong places, it ain't usually disrespect, it's fear. "Why?" I asked, keeping my voice calm the way mamas do when they're standing on thin ice. But he dodged the question, muttering something about logistics and property access, and Eliza needs it sorted. "Oh, sweetheart." The minute he said her name, my jaw locked. Because that girl had been nothing but red flags stitched into a dress. But I didn't argue. I just said, "Meet me here." And when he arrived, Lord have mercy, he looked like a man trying to hold his life together with duct tape and a prayer. His tie was crooked, his new wife nowhere in sight, and his hand shook just enough for a mother to catch it. He didn't hug me, didn't apologize, didn't even step inside. He just stood on the porch, eyes darting around like the world behind him was on fire. "Mom," he said, swallowing hard. "Eliza wants control of the ranch paperwork. She's convinced it should have been transferred as part of everything." My heart dropped clean through the floorboards. There it was. The reason for the tantrum at the wedding. The reason she wanted me gone. The reason my son had turned into someone I barely recognized. Not love. Not loyalty. Ownership. And sugar, something inside me. Something old, patient, and done. Finally snapped into place like a puzzle piece I'd been hunting for all year. I looked him dead in the eye and said the 4 words that shifted the ground under both our feet. "It's not yours, baby." His breath hitched. His shoulders fell. And for the first time since he'd screamed at me in front of 200 people, he looked scared. But trust me, honey, that was only the beginning of what shook loose next. Because the truth about that ranch? Oh, he hadn't heard nothing yet. And when he learned who the ranch was actually willed to and why, the real explosion hit. And sugar, it didn't come from me. "Honey." The morning after Michael looked me dead in the eye and said, "Mom, maybe you should just leave." Felt like waking up after a storm that hadn't finished wrecking the place. I'd driven back to the ranch the night before, Headlights cutting through that long country road like a knife through cold butter, tears drying stiff on my cheeks. I'll tell you this, sleep didn't come easy. Not when the sound of my own son's voice kept echoing like a cracked bell in my mind. Still, I woke up at dawn out of habit, the way old ranch women do, even when our hearts feel like they've been stomped on by a whole herd. The morning was quiet, too quiet. Usually the chickens start squawking, but even they must have sensed my mood because they clucked soft, like they were walking on emotional eggshells. I made myself a cup of coffee, strong enough to put hair on a cactus, and stepped onto the porch, the air crisp, the sky just turning a soft watercolor blue. I held that mug tight and whispered, "Lord, tell me how I'm supposed to face today." Because I knew what today was. Not the wedding day, that disaster was already behind me, but the day after. The day when people start talking, when phones ring, when families pick sides. And baby, they do pick 'em. First message came before 7 a.m. A text from my sister-in-law. "Heard something happened. You okay?" I didn't reply. I wasn't ready for pity. Then another buzz, this time from my neighbor, Miss June. "Saw lights on late last night. If you need pie or backup, holler." That woman would show up with a shotgun and a casserole if I asked. Bless her heart. But I didn't answer her either. I just stared out across the field, watching the horses graze like nothing in the world had changed, while inside me everything had. I kept replaying the moment Michael raised his voice, something he hadn't done to me since he was a stubborn teenager refusing to clean his room. But this wasn't teenage attitude. This was a grown man choosing a woman who didn't even know how to look me in the eye over the mama who'd raised him through hell and back. And the worst part? The part that kept twisting in my chest like barbed wire? He didn't hesitate. Not once. Around noon, when the sun was bright enough to make my porch boards glow, my phone rang again. But this time it wasn't family. It was Jason, one of the ranch hands who'd worked for me since he was barely out of high school. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you want me to cancel that delivery of feed for next week? I heard things got messy last night. Didn't know if you'd want folks coming around." That right there. That cracked something in me. Even he knew. The story was already spreading like wildfire in a dry field. Small towns run on gossip faster than they run on gasoline. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "No sugar," I finally answered. "Don't cancel nothin'. This ranch is still running." What I didn't say was, "I just don't know if my family is." And oh baby. The real shock of the day hadn't even hit yet. Because just when I thought things couldn't sting worse, I saw a pickup truck rolling up my driveway. And who stepped out? Well, that's where everything took a turn I never expected. Because when I saw who walked toward me, and what they came to say, I realized the wedding wasn't the only betrayal waiting for me. Honey, there's a moment in every mother's life when she realizes her child ain't a child anymore, but also ain't quite a grown-up either. That moment hit me right in the gut early the next morning. I was sitting on my porch swing, still replaying yesterday's wedding fiasco, the shame in my son's eyes, the fire in his bride's voice, the air so sharp I swear it could have sliced through denim. I rocked slow, letting the breeze cool my thoughts, when I heard a car pull up the gravel drive. Tires crunching, engine coughing, door slamming. And I knew, before I even turned my head, who it was. My boy. Walking up the path with that stiff, guilty stride men get when they've done wrong but don't yet know how to say it out loud. He didn't look at me at first. Just shoved his hands in his pockets and stared at the horizon like the sunrise had answers he couldn't stand to ask me for. "Morning," he muttered. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my heart was thumping like a drum in a high school marching band. He swallowed hard. "Can we talk?" Now sugar, I'd spent my whole life giving this boy room. Room to grow. Room to make mistakes. Room to be human. But this time, I didn't say yes right away. I just patted the swing. He sat down slow like the seat might bite him. For a long minute, we just listened to the wind brushing through the cottonwoods. Finally he said, "Mom, yesterday shouldn't have happened. I didn't mean for things to get that out of hand. And baby, I'll tell you the truth." That almost sounded like an apology. Almost. But apologies, real ones, don't come dressed in maybes and halfway truths. So I didn't make it easy. "What part shouldn't have happened?" I asked softly. "The part where your bride tried to toss me out like I was the caterer who burned the rolls? Or the part where you let her?" He winced. "Good. It meant he was listening. Mom. She wasn't trying to be cruel. My wife gets overwhelmed. And she's real protective of her side of the family. She thought, I dunno, that you being there would complicate things. I blinked slow, letting his words settle the way dust settles after a storm. Complicate things, I repeated. Baby, I raised you. Put shoes on your little feet. Kept you fed when money was tighter than a jar lid someone screwed on angry. I showed up for every school play, ball game, scraped knee and broken heart. If my presence complicates your wedding, then sweetheart. Someone's been rewriting the whole story. He dropped his head into his hands. I know, Mom. I know. I messed up. But she said it was her day. And I didn't want to start a fight before the ceremony. And you figured starting one during it was better? I asked. He didn't argue. Didn't deflect. Just breathed shallow like the truth was finally catching up with him. Then he whispered, I don't know how to stand up to her sometimes. There it was. The truth he'd been circling for years. I put a hand on his back. Not soft, not scolding, just steady. Baby, standing up to someone you love doesn't mean you're against them. It means you don't disappear to make their shadow look bigger. He breathed in shaky like those words hit somewhere deep. But before I could say more, he turned his head toward me and said something I was absolutely not expecting. Mom. She wants something from you. And she sent me to ask. Lord have mercy. My stomach tightened like a fist. Here it comes, I thought. Here comes the real storm. Because honey, you won't believe what that woman dared to ask me next. And trust me, sugar. This is where the whole story flips on its head. Honey, when Michael finally lifted his head and said, she wants something from you. It felt like the whole porch leaned in just to hear the next sentence. My heart didn't race, no, it settled. Because when a woman's been pushed out, talked down to, humiliated in front of an entire wedding crowd, whatever comes next rarely surprises her. But what did surprise me was the way his voice cracked, almost like he was ashamed before he even said the words. He took a slow breath, rubbing his palms together like he was trying to warm up a truth that had gone cold. Mom, Eliza thinks the ranch should be transferred to us, so we can start our life. My eyes didn't blink, didn't twitch, didn't even water. I just stared at him. This grown man who used to cling to my legs when thunderstorms rolled through. Now sitting here asking me to hand over the very land his father bled for. Start your life. I repeated, quiet as a church whisper. He nodded, staring at his shoes. She says it only makes sense. We're married now. Family assets, you know. Family assets. Lord, that phrase hit me harder than anything she screamed at that wedding. Because the ranch wasn't an asset. It was my home. Michael's childhood. Cooper's last heartbeat. I leaned back in the swing, letting the wood creak under me while the truth settled like dust. Did she say all that herself? I asked. He hesitated. A long guilty pause. Then he whispered. She said you don't really need it anymore. Well, sugar, that right there? That lit a fire in my chest hotter than August asphalt. Not because she wanted the ranch. People have wanted this land for decades. But because she dared to decide what I needed. The nerve. Still I kept calm. That's something motherhood teaches you. Don't swing till you know where the target is. Look at me, baby, I said softly. When he finally did, his eyes were red. Not angry red. Lost red. Do you want the ranch? I asked. He blinked hard. I don't know. She wants stability. And she thinks the ranch is a shortcut. I finished for him. He shut his eyes like the truth stung. I could feel the hurt radiating off him, the push-pull happening inside. A good man tangled in the grip of a woman who didn't know how to love without owning. I reached over, touched his arm. Sweetheart, this ranch ain't a starter kit for newlyweds. It's a legacy. One you ain't ready to hold if your first act as a husband is throwing your mama out like yesterday's trash. He flinched. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind picked up, rustling the pecan tree, almost like Cooper clearing his throat from heaven. Then Michael whispered, she won't let it go, Mom. She's furious you haven't offered it. Offer it? Oh, honey. That woman truly didn't know who she was dealing with. I sat up straighter, letting years of being overlooked and stepped over finally melt off my bones. Baby, I said, voice steady as steel wrapped in velvet. This ranch isn't hers to demand, and it sure as hell isn't yours to give. His breath hitched. Because he knew. He knew something big was coming. Something he wasn't prepared for. Something that would flip this whole marriage power play right on its head. And Sugar, the look on his face when I told him the truth? Lord have mercy, the world stopped for that boy. Because when I revealed who the ranch was actually willed to and why, his whole future shattered like glass hitting concrete. And baby, that's when things really started burning. Honey, I swear that evening felt heavier than a rain cloud ready to burst. I was sitting on my porch swing, the boards creaking underneath me like they were humming some old country tune, when the truth of everything finally settled deep in my bones. My boy had pushed me out of the most sacred day of his life, and not because I'd failed him, but because someone else told him I didn't belong. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to untwist the reason. I was finally letting myself feel it without excusing it. The ranch behind me was quiet, the horses shifting in the barn, the breeze rustling the old pecan tree that had stood longer than most marriages nowadays. I stared at the horizon, thinking about all the years I'd poured into raising a man who once used to run across this very yard hollerin', "Mama, watch me!" Like every move he made needed my applause. Funny how children grow up and suddenly forget who clapped first. But, Sugar, something else was stirring in me, something stronger than sorrow. A kind of quiet grit. The kind that only shows up in women who've been pushed past their limit too many damn times. I wasn't about to let that wedding humiliation be the whole story. Not for me. Not for the people who heard the whispers. Not for the ones who pretended not to see my tears when I walked out that venue alone. Later that night, as I walked through the ranch house turning off lights, I paused at the old hallway photo wall. Every milestone of that boy's life was up there. First toothless grin, his cowboy boot phase. Prom night where he asked me to iron his shirt because he didn't want anyone else to mess it up. And now? He couldn't even stand up for his own mama long enough to keep me at his wedding. I placed my hand on the glass of one picture, him riding his first colt, smiling like the whole world was rooting for him, and whispered, "Where'd you go, baby?" But before my heart could crumble again, something shifted inside me. A clarity. A line that finally drew itself. You see, honey, life has a way of nudging you toward truth when you've ignored it too long. And the truth was simple. You can love someone with your whole chest and still refuse to let them treat you like a spare part. I walked back into the kitchen, poured myself a little sweet tea, and sat down at the table where generations of my family had made hard decisions. I felt them with me. My mama, my grandma, all those stern steel-backed women who didn't raise quitters. And right there, under the soft glow of that old hanging lamp, I realized something powerful. I wasn't the one who broke the family. I was the one holding it up alone for far too long. And Sugar, when a woman stops carrying something that heavy, everybody notices. I leaned back, folded my hands, and thought he threw me out once. But next time he comes knocking, he ain't getting the answer he expects. Because the very next morning, he'd come storming up my driveway demanding something he thought he still had a right to. And Lord, the 4 little words I gave him, they hit harder than a barn door in a windstorm. Sweetheart, you're not gonna believe what he asked for, nor how fast his face changed when I told him my answer. Honey, the morning after that wedding night blowout felt like waking up inside a storm that had finally gone quiet. Not because it passed, but because it was gathering strength somewhere else. My bones ached from crying, but my spirit felt strangely steady. That happens sometimes when a line has finally been crossed so cleanly that there's no going back, no matter how much history or heartstrings tug at you. I brewed a pot of coffee, strong enough to wake the dead like James used to joke, and stepped out onto the ranch porch. The sun was barely peeking up, painting the sky that dusty peach color only early mornings out here ever get right. For a second I almost forgot the pain until I saw it. Tire tracks. Fresh ones, leading straight toward my barn. I tightened my robe and walked down the steps, muttering, "Lord, not today, please." But of course, life doesn't check your schedule before dropping another mess in your lap. When I pushed open the barn door, I found him. My son. Slumped on a hay bale, suit jacket tossed aside, hair erect, eyes swollen. Looked like he'd been wrestling with regret all night and the regret won. He looked up at me, guilt written across his face so loud it practically shouted, "Mom!" I didn't know where else to go. I didn't step closer. Not yet. Not after what he allowed to happen yesterday. So I leaned against the doorframe, crossed my arms and said, "Son, I'm listenin'." He swallowed hard, hands shaking as he rubbed his face. "Everything went to hell after you left? Or after I made you leave?" His voice cracked on that part. Good. It should have cracked. He told me the whole story, how his bride's true colors started showing the second I walked out of the ceremony, how she'd snapped at the coordinator, how she told his sisters to stay out of her bridal photos, how she nearly caused a scene when one plate of appetizers didn't match her Pinterest picture. But the part that made my stomach twist? Her demanding he cut me off from the ranch because no wife should compete with a mother for loyalty. Baby. I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. He kept talking, voice getting smaller. "Mom, I messed up so bad. I didn't defend you. I let her push you out. I let her humiliate you. And now she wants the house keys. She wants everything." I tilted my head, one eyebrow up. "And what do you want?" He hesitated too long. Then, "I guess I want whatever keeps my marriage together." There it was. The truth rolling out like a cold fog. I felt something inside me shut gently, not out of anger but clarity. He wasn't here for me. He wasn't here to make it right. He was here to preserve a marriage already sinking faster than a leaky canoe. So I walked past him slowly, grabbed the barn key ring off its hook, held it in my palm, then closed my fist around it. "Son," I said softly, "you can't build a home on disrespect. And you sure as hell can't fix your marriage with the pieces of my life." He looked up confused. "Mom, what does that mean?" I crouched down, eye level with him, the morning sun catching dust in the air between us. "It means you walked me out of your wedding yesterday. I ain't about to hand you the keys to the place that built you." His face fell. "Mom, please." But I shook my head. "Honey, you made your choice yesterday. Now I'm making mine." And Lord, the silence that followed was heavy enough to buckle the floorboards. But that wasn't the end, sugar, because later that afternoon, his bride herself showed up at my ranch, and what she said next. Phew. It lit the fuse on a whole new explosion. Honey, that next morning at the ranch, I woke up with one of those not-in-your-gut feelings you can't quite place, like the universe was whispering, "Hang tight, girl. Something's coming." The house was quiet except for the old floorboards settling and a kettle whistling weakly on the stove, a sound James used to say was our home clearing its throat. As I poured my tea, I glanced out the window and saw dust rising on the long road leading to the ranch, slow at first, then gathering, then kicking up in a cloud like an unwelcome storm. My fingers tightened around the mug. I didn't need binoculars to know who it was. Only one truck drove that fast when it wanted to make a point. My son Adam. I felt my heartbeat step out of rhythm, not from fear, but from that familiar ache of here we go again. I opened the door before he even knocked, because if he was gonna come in with fire, I'd meet him on the porch where the fresh air could take some of the heat. "Morning, Ma," he said, trying to sound calm, but his voice was shaking just enough for a mama to notice. That boy couldn't hide his heart from me if he tried. He took his hat off, ran his hands through his hair and blew out a breath like he was about to dive underwater. "We gotta talk." That phrase right there, Lord, it's never followed by anything good. He stepped closer, his boots crunching gravel, eyes darting toward the barn like he was checking to see if his new wife's daddy might be hiding behind a hay bale. "Look, Maddie talked to her parents," he started, swallowing hard. "And they think, well, we think, maybe it's best if the ranch transitions to new management." New management. Those two words hit me like a bat to the ribs. This ranch wasn't just land. It wasn't just fences and cows and a house with peeling white paint. This ranch was where I raised him, where he took his first steps, where his daddy taught him to ride, where I held him the night he cried so hard he hiccuped after James passed. And now he wanted to hand it over, like it was a pawn shop bicycle. I didn't cry. Lord knows I've cried enough for that boy. I just stared at him long and slow, the way my own mama used to look at me when she was deciding whether she was disappointed or heartbroken. "So what exactly are y'all askin' me?" I said, keeping my voice steady as stone. He shuffled again, couldn't stand still to save his life, then blurted, "We just need the keys, Ma. We'll figure the rest out later." The keys. He really thought this ranch was something you could hand over like a borrowed lawnmower. I breathed in deep, tasting the dust, the memory, the years. Adam, I said softly. Baby, look at me. He finally lifted his eyes, and for a split second I saw that little boy again, the one who used to run barefoot through these fields yelling, "Watch me, Mama. Watch me." And that's exactly when the 4 words rose in my chest, sure and strong, the kind of words that don't ask permission, they just land. I stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the coffee on my breath and the truth on my tongue, and I said, "You don't deserve it." His eyes widened like someone had knocked all the wind out of him. But oh honey, that was just the beginning of what he was about to hear. Because what he said next. Phew, even the horses stopped chewing to listen. Honey, the next morning rolled in soft and hazy, the kind of morning where the sky looks like it's trying to make peace with itself. And I was sipping my lukewarm coffee at the ranch table when my whole world shifted again. Not with yelling or slamming doors this time, but with a quiet realization that hit harder than any argument ever could. I'd always believed heartbreak comes loud shouting, waving arms, big dramatic speeches. But no, sweetheart. Sometimes it comes disguised as a simple question from someone you once held as a baby. As I watched the sunlight crawl across the wooden planks of my kitchen floor, I saw an old memory of my son, 5 years old, hands sticky from peach jam, reaching out to me and saying, "Mama, don't ever let go." Yet years later at his own wedding, he'd practically tossed me out like yesterday's mail, all because his bride wanted me gone. That memory felt like a splinter working its way deeper into the skin. And while I stared at the chipped edge of my coffee mug, I thought about how the wedding guests looked at me when he said it. Some embarrassed, some confused, a few downright relieved that the problem was being escorted out. Darlin', it's a special kind of loneliness knowing your only child chose convenience over the woman who raised him. But that morning at the table, for the first time since everything blew up, I wasn't crying or shaking. I was thinking clear, steady, razor sharp. Because the ranch wasn't just land, it was legacy. My daddy built it with calloused hands and stubborn hope. My late husband kept it alive through droughts, storms, and lean years. And I'd held it together after he passed, patching fences, feeding cattle, holding busted pieces of life until they fit again. That ranch wasn't a gift. It was a responsibility. And responsibilities weren't supposed to be handed to someone who threw you out in front of 200 people. Just as I took another sip, my phone buzzed with a message from a neighbor. "Saw your boy's car at the gate earlier. Everything all right?" I almost laughed. My boy had been circling my life ever since the wedding blowout, but always from a distance, like a man trying to figure out how to climb a fence he built himself. I stepped out onto the porch, letting the screen door squeak shut behind me, and breathed in the dusty morning air. There he was, parked under the old cottonwood tree, looking small in a way I hadn't seen since he was 10 years old and broke his arm falling off the barn roof. He didn't see me yet. He was pacing, kicking dirt, rubbing his face like he was practicing what to say. And honey, that's when it hit me. He wasn't here for reconciliation. He was here for possession. My heart thudded hard, but not from fear, from clarity. The ranch keys jingled in my pocket like they were reminding me who they belonged to. I stepped off the porch, each footfall steady as scripture, and called his name. He turned, startled, then forced a tired smile, one I'd seen him use on lone officers and irritated coaches. "Mom," he said, voice shaky, "we need to talk about the ranch." But before he could say another word, before he could spin excuses or soften the blow, I looked him right in the eyes and gave him the 4 words that stopped him dead in his tracks. And sweetheart, the look on his face? Lord have mercy, I'll never forget it. Because those 4 words didn't just silence him. They changed everything. Where the real storm begins. That evening, after all the chaos at the ranch and the ugly scene at the wedding, the house felt too quiet. Quiet in that way that makes your bones feel hollow. I sat at my kitchen table, still in the same cardigan I'd worn when my son told me to leave his big day. I hadn't even taken off my earrings. I guess my body moved on, but my heart hadn't caught up yet. The clock on the wall ticked real loud, like it was scolding me for not knowing what to do next. I kept replaying the moment he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Mom, please just go. She doesn't want you here." Sweetheart, you ever hear something that doesn't just hurt your feelings? It rearranges them? That was me. My boy, the one I raised on casseroles and late-night homework talks, the one who used to run to me after every scraped knee. Suddenly acting like I was some stranger who wandered in uninvited. I didn't cry when he first said it. Shock has a funny way of locking the tears in place. But sitting there in that empty kitchen? Lord, I felt every bit of it. And just as that ache started twisting deeper, I heard boots on gravel outside. Slow, dragging steps. The kind that let you know someone wasn't arriving by choice. It was him. I froze. I wasn't ready. Not for apologies, not for excuses, not for another shove out the door. He knocked once, soft, like he was scared the wood might knock him back. Mom? You home? His voice was small. Not the wedding day voice full of pride in somebody else's script. This was my boy's voice. The one I hadn't heard since before he grew into the kind of man who lets people speak for him. I opened the door just an inch, enough to see his face. His hair was messed up, tie shoved into his pocket, eyes red like he hadn't slept. Can we talk? He asked, swallowing hard. About what? I kept my tone even, but inside, honey, my heart was pacing like a scared dog during 4th of July fireworks. He stepped back a bit, wringing his hands the way he used to when he broke something and didn't know how to admit it. I shouldn't have said what I did, he murmured. It all got tense. Real fast. Tense. I raised an eyebrow. Son, you threw your own mother out like I was trying to crash the buffet. He winced. I know. I messed up. But something about the way he said it told me he wasn't here for the kind of apology that heals. He was here because he wanted something. And sugar, a mom knows that tone. We come out the womb reading our kids like weather reports. Sure enough, after a few seconds of silence, he dug into his pocket and pulled out a keyring. My ranch keys. He held them flat in his palm like peace offerings. Look, we need to talk about the ranch, he said, voice tightening. Me and Aubrey were kinda stuck. There were some mix-ups with the paperwork and, well, we need access. Tonight. There it was. The real reason. Not guilt. Not love. Not regret. A need. I stepped onto the porch, crossed my arms, and met his eyes dead on. The wind blew just enough to lift my hair. And for a moment I felt James standing beside me, steady as always. You came here for keys, not your mother, I said quietly. His jaw twitched. And that's when the shift happened. Not loud, not dramatic, but sharp enough to split the night in two. 'Cause, sweetheart, what I told him next. It didn't just stop him. It flat out silenced him. And the look on his face told me the story had finally changed, but not the way he thought it would. I don't know how long I sat there in that old rocking chair. Fingers curled around the arms like I was holding on to the last bit of patience I had left. The house was too quiet. That kind of stillness that lets your thoughts echo louder than you want. I could still hear the wedding band from the night before. Those muffled drums, that tinkly piano. Funny how a moment meant to be beautiful could leave a bruise you feel in your bones the next day. Out the window, the ranch looked peaceful, golden fields stretching out like nothing in the world had gone wrong. The horses were grazing slow, the way animals do when they trust the land under their feet. And I thought, isn't it something? The creatures who never took from me are the ones who never caused me hurt. Sometimes nature tells the truth straighter than people do. Around mid-morning, gravel crunched outside, too sharp, too quick. I didn't even have to look. My mama heart recognized the rhythm of my son's footsteps long before he reached the porch. And just like that, the ache flared again. Not fresh, just deep. The kind you feel in old scars when rain's coming. He didn't knock. He never knocked. He pushed the screen door open like he owned the oxygen in the room. But this time, there wasn't anger on his face. No, sugar, there was desperation. The kind a grown man gets when the world stops making him the center of it. Mom, he said, breath shaky. We need the ranch keys. There it was. The request that showed me clear as day what I already knew deep down. He hadn't come for me. He hadn't come because he realized how he'd hurt me, or because the weight of his choices finally cracked through that shell he'd built around himself. He came because he needed something I had. Something he thought he was entitled to. He stood there waiting, shifting from foot to foot, trying to piece together which tone might melt my heart fastest. He'd used them all on me over the years, the sweet one, the sharp one, the ashasman. But that morning, I wasn't falling for any of it. I stayed seated, rocking slow enough to steady my breath. What for? I asked, because sometimes a simple question tells you more than a storm of accusations ever could. He swallowed hard. Her parents, they think it's best if we move out sooner than planned. They want us on the land this week so we can start prepping it for the house. Ah, so that was the game. The bride who'd told me, in front of a whole wedding crowd, that I wasn't wanted near her big day now wanted my land, my home, my legacy. I nodded once, small and quiet. I see. He stepped closer, voice tightening. Mom, please. This isn't the time to be emotional. Lord, that word. Emotional. Men love to use it like a leash. I stood finally, slow but steady, letting the years of being overlooked slide right off my shoulders. He waited for an answer he thought he already knew. A yes shaped like guilt, like habit, like the mother he'd grown used to using as a safety net. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the old brass key ring, and let the metal glint between us like truth under sunlight. You want the keys? I said softly. Then you're gonna hear 4 words first. He blinked, confused, unprepared. And honey, when those 4 words left my mouth, the whole ranch went silent, like even the wind paused to listen. For a split second, when the screen lit up with my son's name, I wondered if I'd imagined everything. The shouting at the wedding, the humiliation, the ranch keys incident, all of it. But as soon as I swiped open the message, reality settled in just as heavy as a wet wool coat. Mom, can we talk? Please. It's urgent. Funny how folks love that word, urgent, right after they're done treating you like yesterday's trash. I didn't reply. I just sat there on my porch, watching the dusk settle over the fields like a soft blanket. My old dog, Rusty, lay at my feet, lifting his head every now and then as if he felt the storm gathering in my chest. About 20 minutes later, tires crunched on the gravel. Headlights swept across the yard, bouncing off the barn. And before I could even stand, my son stepped out of his truck, running a hand through his hair like a man trying to tame a world falling apart. He didn't even knock. Just came straight up onto the porch, stopping a few feet away like he wasn't sure if he should come closer. Good. Let that uncertainty sit with him a while. Mom, he breathed, voice cracking. Everything's messed up. I didn't know where else to go. I raised a brow. You sure? Seemed like your bride had all the say the last time I checked. He winced, shoulders caving in like someone deflated him. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have talked to you that way. Talked to me that way? Honey, he threw me out of his damn wedding. But I kept that inside. This wasn't the moment for a shouting match, not anymore. Rusty trotted over to him, sniffed his boots, then wandered off. Even the dog looked disappointed. My son rubbed his face. Mom, she said things. Told me you were trying to control everything. She told her family you were stirring drama. I didn't want a scene at the wedding. I let out a slow breath. And instead you made the scene yourself, didn't you? He looked down like a little boy who'd been caught stealing cookies, not a grown man who'd forgotten who raised him. Then he whispered. She left. That made me blink. Not in surprise. Lord knows I'd sensed the cracks forming long before he did. But because I knew this moment would come sooner or later. Control like hers never stays gentle. It wants everything, the money, the authority, the narrative, the oxygen in the room. Left how? I asked quietly. She packed a bag and went to her mother's. Took her ring off. Said I embarrassed her by caving to you after the wedding. I didn't speak. I just waited, letting the truth dig into him the way truth has a habit of doing. He kept talking, words spilling like water from a cracked bucket. I've been calling her all day. She won't answer. Her parents blocked my number. And the ranch, he swallowed hard. Mom, I didn't know the deed was in your name. I didn't know she needed your permission. Ah, there it was. Not the heartbreak. Not the regret. The real reason he was here. He finally understood the weight of what he'd thrown away. He finally realized the ranch was never his to offer, never his to use as leverage, never his to build someone else's kingdom on. He finally realized I wasn't just mom who'd absorb anything. I was the woman who built the damn place. He whispered, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. I just need you. And Lord help me, my heart ached. Because no matter how old your kids get, watching them break still hits you right in the ribs. But this time, he wasn't the only one who mattered. Not anymore. And he wasn't ready for the choice I was about to place in front of him. A choice that would decide everything that came next. Honey, when my boy stood on that porch, shoulders sagged in, Eyes swollen, looking more like that scared little child who used to crawl into my bed after thunderstorms than the man who threw me out of his own wedding. I felt the whole weight of motherhood settle on me. Heavy, warm, complicated as all get out. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a colt who'd outrun his own shadow. "Mom, I lost her," he whispered. "I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make things right." I took a slow breath, letting the cool evening air fill my lungs, because what I said next needed to come from a place deeper than anger, deeper than grief, right from the part of my soul that hadn't stopped loving him even when he forgot how to love me back. "Baby," I said gently, "the problem isn't that she left. The problem is you've been letting someone else tell you who you're allowed to love, honor, and stand beside." He flinched like the truth had teeth. "Mom, she said I needed boundaries with you. She said you make things complicated." I stepped closer, laying my hand on his cheek the same way I did when he was 5 and ran face first into the fence. "Sweetheart, families are complicated. But boundaries ain't walls you throw people over." He started crying then, quiet at first, then messy. Big, shoulder-shaken, years-worth tears. Rusty even came over and nudged his knee like he was trying to help mop up the heartbreak. After a while he whispered, "I don't want to lose you too." And sugar, that right there split my heart clean open, because beneath all the hurt, beneath the pride and fear and foolish choices, there was my boy. Still mine. Still reaching. Still wanting a place to land. I pulled in a shaky breath. "You didn't lose me," I said. "But you are gonna learn something tonight. You don't get to treat people like afterthoughts and still expect front row love. Not even from your mama." He looked up, eyes red, chest trembling. "So what do I do?" I took his hands, big, rough, work-scarred hands that once held toy tractors, and squeezed them. "You stop letting folks dictate your backbone. You stop handing over pieces of your life just to keep someone else calm. And you damn sure stop sacrificing the people who raised you so somebody else can feel bigger." He swallowed hard. "And the ranch?" I smiled softly, sad but steady. "Baby, the ranch stays with me until you learn how to stand in it as your own man. Not as someone's puppet." He nodded, slow but certain, like truth was finally finding a home in him. The cicadas hummed loud in the fields. The sky turned that deep blue right before night swallows the last bit of day. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt peace settle over the porch. My son stayed a while. Long enough for coffee, long enough for conversation, long enough to remember he had a mother who wasn't going anywhere, just not bend anymore. And when he finally left, he hugged me tight, real tight. Like the boy who once whispered, "Mama, don't ever let go." Only this time, I held on for me too. Now honey, if you enjoyed this story and want more real, raw, unfiltered moments like this, go on and like the video and subscribe to Unfiltered Life Stories. Grandma's got plenty more to tell.